The nurse told the parents of a newly born child, "You have a cute baby." The smiling husband said, "I bet you say that to all new parents." "No," she replied, "just to those whose babies really are good-looking." The husband again asked, "So what do you say to the others?" The nurse replied, "The baby looks just like you." Ever since second grade, John had auditioned for every school play, but he never got a part until now. Bursting through the front door, he shouted, "Dad, I finally got a role!" His father, excited for him, asked, "That's great, son. Who do you play?" John beamed and said, "I'm playing a man who's been married for 20 years and has 3 kids." His dad patted him on the back and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, son. Maybe next time you'll get a speaking part." A blonde woman goes into an electronics store and points to an item on the shelf. "I'd like to buy this television," she says excitedly. The salesman, shaking his head, replies, "Sorry, but we don't sell to blondes." Shocked, she storms out of the store. That evening, she dyes her hair black, changes her outfit, and returns the next day. "Hi there. I'd like to purchase this television," she says confidently to another salesman. Without hesitation, he responds, "Sorry, but we don't sell to blondes." Now, completely frustrated, she exclaims, "But how did you know I was blonde?" The salesman smirks and says, "Because that's not a TV, it's a microwave." I recently picked a new primary care doctor. After 2 visits and a bunch of lab tests, he looked at me and said, "You're doing fairly well for your age." A little concerned, I couldn't help but ask, "Doc, do you think I make it to 80? He paused and asked, "Well, do you smoke or drink?" "Oh no, never," I replied. "Do you eat ribeye steaks or barbecue?" "Nope, I've heard red meat isn't healthy." "Do you spend time outdoors? Golf, sailing, rock climbing?" "No, I prefer to stay inside." "Do you gamble, drive fast cars, or, fool around?" "Absolutely not." The doctor stared at me for a moment, then said, "Then why do you care if you live to be 80? Doctor and a lawyer in 2 cars collided on a country road. The lawyer, seeing that the doctor was a little shaken up, helped him from the car and offered him a drink from his hip flask. The doctor accepted and handed the flask back to the lawyer, who closed it and put it away. "Aren't you going to have a drink yourself?" asked the doctor. "Sure, after the police leave," replied the attorney. Miss Brooks was testing the class with some tricky riddles. She smiled and said, "I come in many sizes. When I'm not well, I drip. When you blow me, you feel good. What am I?" The class fell silent, students glancing at each other, unsure. The principal, observing from the back, shifted nervously in his chair. Little Johnny, without hesitation, raised his hand and confidently answered, "Nose." Dave was lounging on his front porch, sipping a cold drink and enjoying the afternoon sun, when he noticed his blonde neighbor, Lisa, step outside. She walked straight to her mailbox, opened it, stared for a moment, then frowned and went back inside. A few minutes later, she came out again, checked the mailbox, and walked back in, shaking her head. By the 3rd time, Dave was hooked. He leaned forward, watching as she marched out, yanked open the mailbox, and let out an exasperated sigh. Curiosity got the better of him. "Lisa, everything okay?" he called. She threw her hands up. No, my stupid computer keeps saying I've got mail, but there's nothing here. Dave nearly fell out of his chair laughing. A small boy is sent to bed by his father. 5 minutes later, Dad. What? I'm thirsty. Can you bring me a drink of water? No, you had your chance. Lights out. 5 minutes later. Dad! What? I'm thirsty. Can I have a drink of water? I told you no. If you ask again, I'll have to spank you. 5 minutes later. Dad! What? When you come in to spank me, can you bring me a drink of water? At St. Peter's Catholic Church, they hold weekly marriage seminars for husbands. At last week's session, the priest asked Giuseppe, who was approaching his 50th wedding anniversary, to share his secret to a long and happy marriage. Giuseppe stood up and said, Wella, I've always tried to treat her nicer. Spend a da money on her, but the best thing I did was take her to Italy for our 25th anniversary. The priest smiled and said, Giuseppe, that is truly inspiring. So what are you planning for your wife on your 50th anniversary? Giuseppe puffed out his chest proudly and said, I gonna go pick her up. After a night on the town, a young woman brought a new friend home for a late-night drink. You can't make any noise, she warned him. My parents are upstairs, and if they find out, they'll kill us. Things started getting heated on the sofa, but after a while, alcohol got the better of the man. I have to go, he said. Well, you can't go upstairs. The bathroom is right next to my parents' bedroom, she replied. Use the kitchen sink. So he dutifully retired to the kitchen. A few minutes later, he popped his head around the door and asked, Do you have any toilet paper, or should I just use a paper towel?
During a visit to my doctor, I asked, How do you decide if an older person needs to be placed in a long-term care home? Well, he replied, we fill up a bathtub and give them a teaspoon, a teacup, and a bucket, then ask them to empty the tub. Oh, that's easy, I said. A normal person would use the bucket since it's the biggest. No, he said with a smile. A normal person would just pull the plug. Would you like a bed by the window? A couple go for a meal at a Chinese restaurant and order chicken surprise. The waiter brings the meal, served in a lidded cast iron pot. Just as the wife is about to serve herself, the lid of the pot rises slightly and she briefly sees two beady little eyes looking around before the lid slams back down. Good grief, did you see that? She asks her husband. He hasn't, so she asks him to look in the pot. He reaches for it and again the lid rises, and he sees two little eyes looking around before it slams down. Rather perturbed, he calls the waiter over, explains what is happening, and demands an explanation. Please, sir, says the waiter, what you order? The husband replies, chicken surprise. Ah, so sorry, says the waiter. I bring you Peking duck. An elderly couple had dinner at another couple's house, and after eating, the wives left the table and went into the kitchen. The two gentlemen were talking, and one said, Last night we went out to a new restaurant and it was really great. I would recommend it very highly. The other man said, What is the name of the restaurant? The first man thought and finally said, What is the name of that flower you give to someone you love? You know, the one that's red and has thorns. Do you mean a rose? Yes, that's the one, replied the man. He then turned towards the kitchen and yelled, Rose, what's the name of that restaurant we went to last night? A businessman on his deathbed called his friend and said, Bill, I want you to promise me that when I die you will have my remains cremated. And what, his friend asked, do you want me to do with your ashes? The businessman said, Just put them in an envelope and mail them to the Internal Revenue Service. Write on the envelope, Now, you have everything. A man walks into a bar with a paper bag in his hand. He sits down and places the bag on the counter. The bartender walks up and asks, "What's in the bag?" The man reaches into the bag and pulls out a little man about 12 inches in height and sets him on the counter. He reaches back into the bag and pulls out a small piano, setting it on the counter as well. He reaches back into the bag again and pulls out a tiny piano bench. The little man sits at the piano and starts playing a beautiful piece by Mozart. "Where on earth did you get that?" asks the surprised bartender. The man responds by reaching into the paper bag once more. This time, he pulls out a magic lamp. He hands it to the bartender and says, "Here, rub it." So the bartender rubs the lamp, and suddenly there's a gust of smoke and a beautiful genie is standing before him. "I will grant you one wish. But just one." The bartender gets really excited and without hesitation says, "I want $1,000,000. A few moments later, a duck walks into the bar. Then another duck, and another. Pretty soon the entire bar is filled with ducks, and they keep coming. The bartender turns to the man and says, "You know, I think your genie is a little deaf. I asked for $1,000,000, not 1,000,000 ducks." The man replies, "Do you really think I asked for a 12-inch p?" A salesman returns from his assignment in Saudi Arabia, looking utterly defeated. Seeing his face, a friend asks, "Why the long face?" The salesman groans. "It was a disaster. My marketing campaign completely failed." "What happened? I thought you had a solid strategy." "Well," the salesman sighs, "when I got there, I was confident I'd nail it. The only issue, I don't speak Arabic. So, I came up with a simple, foolproof ad campaign using 3 pictures. First image, a man collapsed in the scorching desert, exhausted. Second image, the man drinking our new Coca-Cola brand. Third image, the man looking refreshed and full of energy. I plastered those posters everywhere. You couldn't walk a block without seeing them." "That sounds brilliant. So why didn't it work?" The salesman shakes his head. "Because no one told me they read from right to left." Stalin was visiting a small town in Russia. Huge crowd was there to receive him, holding signs with words of praise for Stalin, party, union, etc. Among them, secret police officers spotted a particularly old man holding a sign saying, "Thank you, Comrade Stalin, for a happy childhood." Our officers approached him angrily. "What is this, some kind of mockery? You must be at least 80 years old. Comrade Stalin wasn't even born when you were a child." Old man said, "That's exactly what I'm thankful for." A bloke starts his new job at the zoo and is given 3 tasks. First, he's asked to tidy up the exotic fish pool, which is overrun with weeds. While he's working, a huge fish leaps out and startles him. In his panic, he accidentally knocks the fish into a nearby wheelbarrow. Not wanting to waste it, he decides to take it to the lions, thinking, lions will eat anything. Next, he moves on to clean the chimp enclosure. The cheeky chimps are playful and start throwing coconuts at him. While dodging the flying coconuts, he accidentally knocks some over into the same wheelbarrow. Again, he thinks, well, the lions won't mind, and wheels them over to the lion enclosure. Finally, he's asked to collect honey from the South American beehives. As he carefully gathers the honey, the buzzing bees surround him. He accidentally tips the honeycomb into the wheelbarrow along with the bees. Thinking of the lions once more, he heads to their area and says, "Here's something sweet for dessert." Later that day, a new lion arrives at the zoo. Curious, he asks another lion, "So, what's the food like around here?" The lion grins and says, "Oh, it's fantastic. Today, we had fish and chimps with mushy bees." An 80-year-old man goes to a doctor for a checkup. The doctor tells him, "You're in terrific shape. There's nothing wrong with you. Why, you might live forever. By the way, how old was your father when he died?" The 80-year-old responded, "Did I say he was dead?" The doctor couldn't believe it. So he said, "Well, how old was your grandfather when he died?" The 80-year-old responded again, "Did I say he was dead?" The doctor was astonished. He said, "You mean to tell me you are 80 years old and both your father and your grandfather are both alive?" "Not only that," said the patient, My grandfather is 126 years old, and next week he is getting married for the first time. The doctor said, "After 126 years of being a bachelor, why on earth did your grandfather want to get married?" His patient looked up at the doctor and said, "Did I say he wanted to?" Two men are walking across a field when they come across a very large hole in the ground. So large that they can't see the bottom of this hole. "I wonder how deep it is," the first man says. The second man pulls out a coin and flips it into hole. They wait and listen. 30 seconds pass and still not a sound. "Wow!" they both exclaim. "Let's try something else," says one man to the other. They spot a large rock nearby, and with a struggle, they get the rock to the hole. They roll it in, wait and listen. Still nothing. "My goodness! How deep this hole must be," says one man. "Let's try that huge log over there," says the other. Again, with a struggle, they haul this huge log to the hole and roll it in. As they wait and listen, and seemingly out of nowhere, a goat runs up and jumps in the hole. As they both look at each other in shock, they hear a tractor coming across the field. Shortly after, a farmer arrives and asks, "Either of you boys seen my goat?" "Yeah," they both exclaim. "One just came by and jumped in this hole." The farmer sits back and tells them, No, couldn't have been my goat. My goat was chained to a huge log." Two guys are working at a sawmill when, wham! One of them gets too close to the blade and chops off his arm. His buddy grabs the severed limb, shoves it in a plastic bag, and rushes him to the hospital. The next day, he visits his friend and finds him casually playing tennis. "Incredible," he says. "Medical science is amazing." A month later, same sawmill, same two guys, wham! This time, the poor guy's leg gets lopped off. Once again, his buddy scoops it up, bags it, and hauls him to the hospital. The next day, he stops by to check in and finds his pal outside playing football. "Incredible," he says. "Medical science is amazing." Another month goes by, and wouldn't you know it, wham! This time, the guy bends too close, and off comes his head. His buddy sighs, shoves it in a plastic bag, and rushes to the hospital one more time. The next day, he arrives to visit his friend, but he's nowhere to be found. He spots the doctor and asks, "Hey, doc, where's my friend? I brought him in yesterday." The doctor shakes his head. "Oh yeah, some idiot put his head in a plastic bag, and he suffocated." A mother and her young daughter were walking through New York City when the mother tried to hail a cab. As they waited, the little girl noticed a group of women dressed in flashy clothes, loitering on a street corner. Finally, the mother got a cab, and they climbed in. The curious little girl turned to her mother and asked, "Mommy, what are those ladies doing over there?" The mother, trying to dodge the question, replied, "Oh, those ladies are just waiting for their husbands to come pick them up on their way home from work." The cab driver, overhearing the exchange, turned around and said, "Come on, lady. Tell your daughter the truth. They're hookers." There was a brief pause of awkward silence. Then, the little girl, with a confused look, asked, "Mommy, do the hooker ladies have children?" The mother, without missing a beat, replied, "Of course, dear. Where do you think cabbies come from?" A man arrives at the pearly gates and is met by a guardian angel. As he steps forward, the angel greets him but quickly warns that getting into heaven isn't so simple. There are requirements. "Tell me," the angel asks, "were you religious in life?" "No," the man admits. "That's not good," the angel frowns. "Were you generous? Did you give to the poor? Donate to charity?" "Not really," the man says. The angel sighs. "Did you at least perform any good deeds? Help a neighbor? Anything at all?" The man shakes his head, and the angel is getting frustrated. "Come on," the angel pleads. "Everyone does something good at some point. Think. I'm trying to help you here." The man brightens. "Oh. Well, there was this one time. I walked out of a store and saw a little old lady surrounded by a dozen angels. They had taken her purse, pushing her around and mocking her. I was furious. I threw down my bags, charged into the group, snatched her purse back, and helped her up. Then I got right in the face of the biggest, meanest biker, called him a coward, and spat in his face." The angel's eyes widen. That's incredible. When did this happen? The man glances at his watch. About 10 minutes ago. A fancy limousine pulled up to a red light, and right next to it stopped a tiny, humble Mini. Sitting in the back of the limo was a wealthy businessman, feeling extra proud of his ride. With a smug grin, he rolled down his window and started bragging to the Mini's owner. This is the most luxurious limo money can buy. It has ABS, airbags for every seat, automatic climate control, an onboard computer, tinted photochromatic glass, a minibar, satellite TV, and so much more. Before he could finish listing off all his luxuries, the Mini driver casually interrupted. Yeah, but do you have a video screen in there? Just then, the light turned green, and the limo sped off. But the businessman couldn't shake the thought. He didn't have a video screen. Feeling defeated, he had one installed that very day. A few days later, fate brought them together again at another red light. The limo driver spotted the same Mini, but this time it was pulled over to the side with its windows completely fogged up and steam pouring out. Curious, the businessman got out, walked over, and knocked on the window. After a moment, the Mini owner cracked it open, dripping wet. Proudly, the businessman announced, "I installed a DVD player in my limo." The Mini driver blinked in disbelief and shouted, "What? You made me get out of the shower just for that." At one point during a game, a coach pulled aside one of his 7-year-old players and asked, "Do you know what cooperation is? What it means to be part of a team?" The little guy nodded, of course. The coach went on, "It's not about winning or losing, but how we play together, right?" The boy agreed again. Then the coach dropped some serious truth. When you get a penalty, you don't argue, curse, or call the ref names. Got it? Once more, the boy nodded. The coach wasn't done. And if I pull you off the ice to give someone else a turn, calling me a dumb hole isn't good sportsmanship, is it? The boy nodded again. With a smile, the coach said, "Great. Now go explain all that to your mom." Joe and Wanda lived in a cozy city apartment, and they found themselves in a bit of a bind one lazy Sunday afternoon. They wanted a little privacy, but their 10-year-old son was home, and the walls in their apartment were thin. After a bit of brainstorming, they came up with a plan. They decided to send their son out to the balcony with the mission of being their spy for the afternoon. His job? To report on all the exciting happenings in the neighborhood. They figured it would keep him occupied for a bit, and maybe even amuse him. Their son didn't hesitate, excited to be the neighborhood reporter. "There's a dog barking over at the Johnson's house," he called out, looking down at the street. "Someone's washing their car," he added with a grin. After a few moments of silence, he piped up again. "The Millers are putting up a new fence," he observed. "Oh, and the Pattersons just brought home a pizza." Wanda and Joe exchanged a satisfied look as they began to carry out their plan. Then came a pause, followed by a very loud announcement. "Mom, Dad, you won't believe this. The Smith's kid is standing on the balcony with binoculars." Joe froze. "What? How do you know that?" The boy replied matter-of-factly, "Because he's watching us." An attorney arrived home late, after a very tough day trying to get a stay of execution. His last-minute plea for clemency to the governor had failed, and he was feeling worn out and depressed. As soon as he walked through the door at home, his wife started on him about, "What time of night to be getting home is this? Where have you been? Dinner is cold and I'm not reheating it." And on and on and on. Too shattered to play his usual role in this familiar ritual, he poured himself a shot of whiskey and headed off for a long hot soak in the bathtub, pursued by the predictable sarcastic remarks as he dragged himself up the stairs. While he was in the bath, the phone rang. The wife answered and was told that her husband's client, James Wright, had been granted a stay of execution after all. Wright would not be hanged tonight. Finally realizing what a terrible day he must have had, she decided to go upstairs and give him the good news. As she opened the bathroom door, she was greeted by the sight of her husband, bent over, drying his legs and feet. "They're not hanging Wright tonight," she said. He whirled around and screamed, "For the love of woman, don't you ever stop." 3 men died in a car accident and arrived at the pearly gates, where they were greeted by Jesus himself. The Lord said, I will ask each of you a simple question. If you tell the truth, I will welcome you into heaven. But if you lie, hell awaits." Turning to the first man, the Lord asked, "How many times did you cheat on your wife?" The man stood tall and replied, "Lord, I was a faithful husband. I never cheated." "Very good," the Lord said. "For your loyalty, you shall have a grand mansion and a limousine for transportation." Then the Lord asked the second man, "And how about you?" The second man hesitated before admitting, "Lord, I cheated on my wife twice." The Lord nodded. "You may enter, but for your unfaithfulness, you will receive a 4-bedroom house and a BMW." Finally, the Lord turned to the third man. "And you?" The man sighed and said, "Lord, I cheated about 8 times." The Lord frowned slightly but said, "I will still allow you in, but you will get a 1-room apartment and a Yugo for transportation." A few hours later, the second and third men found the first man sobbing. "Why are you crying?" they asked. "You got the mansion and the limo." Through his tears, the first man choked out, "I just saw my wife, and she was riding a skateboard." A wealthy lawyer is cruising in his limo when he spots 2 men by the roadside, bending down and munching on grass. Curious, he pulls over and rolls down his window. "Hey, why are you guys eating grass?" he asks. One of the men looks up and replies, "We're too poor, sir. We don't have anything else to eat." The lawyer pauses for a moment, then says, "Hop in. You and your buddy can come home with me and I'll feed you." The man hesitates. "But sir, I have a wife and kids, and so does my friend." "Bring them too," the lawyer insists. Soon, the limo is packed with the 2 men, their wives, and their children. One of the women turns to the lawyer with teary eyes. "Sir, you have no idea how much this means to us." "Thank you." The lawyer smiles warmly and says, "No worries. The grass is almost a foot tall. You'll love it." A high school student and his best friend were rushing to class after his best friend caused them both to be late. His best friend asked, "Would you like to hear a joke?" "Sure," he replied. "What do you and your sister have in common?" "I don't know. Because of me, you're both late for your next period." A man was driving through town with his windows down when he heard a man at a small roadside stand yelling, "Lobster tails! Get your lobster tails here, only $2. The man hit his brakes and pulled over. He walked up to the salesman thinking this must be too good to be true. "Are you really only charging $2 for lobster tails?" "Yes, sir." "What are you looking for, a long one or a short one?" "Both only $2. "How about the longest one you got?" The man handed the salesman 2 $1 bills. The salesman thanked him and instructed him to sit in a nearby chair as he knelt down under the counter. The man thought that was strange, but complied, happily awaiting his lobster tail. After a minute, the salesman popped up from under the counter with a large book. He opened the book to the front page, cleared his throat, and began to read. "Once upon a time, there was a lobster." Kenny, a city boy, decided to embrace country life and bought a donkey from an old farmer for $100. The farmer promised to deliver the donkey the next day. The following morning, the farmer arrived with bad news. "Sorry, son, but the donkey died." Kenny frowned. "Well, just give me my money back." "Can't do that," the farmer said. "I already spent it." Kenny thought for a moment. "All right then, just unload the donkey." Puzzled, the farmer asked, "What are you going to do with a dead donkey?" "I'm going to raffle him off," Kenny replied confidently. "You can't raffle off a dead donkey," the farmer exclaimed. "Sure, I can," Kenny said. "I just won't tell anyone he's dead." A few weeks later, the farmer ran into Kenny and curiously asked, "So, what happened with that dead donkey?" Kenny grinned. "I raffled him off, sold 500 tickets for $2 each, and made a profit of $898. The farmer was shocked. "Didn't anyone complain?" "Just the guy who won," Kenny said. "So, I gave him his $2 back." Ever since I was a child, I've always had a fear of someone under my bed at night. So I went to a psychiatrist and told him I've got problems. Every time I go to bed, I think there's somebody under it. I'm scared. I think I'm going crazy. Just put yourself in my hands for 1 year, said the psychiatrist. Come talk to me 3 times a week and we should be able to get rid of those fears. How much do you charge? $80 per visit, replied the doctor. I'll sleep on it and if needed I will come back to you, I said. 6 months later the psychiatrist met me on the street. Why didn't you come to see me about those fears you were having, he asked. Well, $80 a visit 3 times a week for a year is an awful lot of money. A bartender cured me for $10. I was so happy to have saved all that money that I went and bought me a new SUV. Is that so? With a bit of an attitude he said, and how, may I ask, did a bartender cure you? He told me to cut the legs off the bed. Ain't nobody under there now. One day, a little boy named Sam was playing in the backyard when, during an intense pretend battle, he accidentally knocked over the outhouse. Panicked, he ran into the woods, hiding until after dark. When he finally came home, his pappy was waiting for him with a suspicious look. Son, did you knock over the outhouse this afternoon? Sam gulped. No, pappy, he lied. His father sighed and said, Let me tell you a story, son. A long time ago, young George Washington got a brand new axe. Excited, he tested it out, and accidentally chopped down his mother's favorite cherry tree. Realizing what he had done, he ran off, just like you. When he came back, his father asked, George, did you cut down the cherry tree? And do you know what he said? Father, I cannot tell a lie. I did indeed chop down the tree. And because he was honest, his father forgave him and let him go without punishment. Pappy leaned in and asked again, Now, son, did you knock down the outhouse? Sam took a deep breath and said, Pappy, I cannot tell a lie. I did indeed knock down the outhouse. Then, Pappy tanned his hide red, white, and blue. Through teary eyes, Sam cried, But Pappy, George Washington's father forgave him. Why did you spank me? Pappy shook his head and said, Because, son, George Washington's father wasn't sitting in that cherry tree when he chopped it down. A man asks a farmer if he can work for a night's lodging and a meal. Farmer gets a knock on his door. It's a man in his mid-30s who looks like he's been traveling a while. The man asks if he could earn a meal and a place to stay for the night. Do you have any skills? The farmer asks. Well, I do have a rare gift. I can communicate with animals. Sure you can, the farmer says. But I like your style. I'll put you to work. So the man does a few chores around the farm and earns his meal. At dinner, he says to the farmer, I know you don't believe me, but I actually do communicate with animals. I can prove it. I spoke to the hens, and they said you were there every morning before dawn to collect their eggs, and you've been doing so every day for years since your wife passed. The farmer says, Wow, that's exactly right. The man continues, I spoke to your cow, and she said you faithfully milked her every day before dawn, and you've been doing so every day for years since your wife passed. The farmer says, I'm amazed. That's true. The man says, and I spoke to your sheep. That sheep's a liar.